Hey guys, Morphologist here.
What's up guys, it's Wasted Space.
And we're back with the next episode of Patchology. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about 1.101 and 1.102 because we missed the last episode.
Yeah, we kind of screwed up with that one, and that's mostly my fault. I was away at EGX, which is a big gaming convention in the UK for the weekend, so yeah, blame's on me. We didn't have a chance to really record it, but it wasn't so much of a patch that needed to be recorded immediately. We can at least talk about it a bit now.
And you did make some pretty cool connections at EGX, but I think we'll leave that for another conversation. So let's get into it. 1.101 introduced a number of fixes and some features. Mainly, though, let's start off with one of the big fixes, Wasted, with the landing gear.
Yeah, I mean, landing gear fix is obviously something we've been looking out for a long time. There was a bunch of other smaller fixes, and a lot of this stuff was geared towards bits and bobs that they had broken in previous patches, or bits and bobs that need to be done, but they're relatively minor bits. The landing gear has been a pretty serious thing for a long time, so it's really cool to see that finally working. You're not about to explode your ships out when you're jumping or when you're travelling in space. Although at the same time, I mean, it's not that notable thing to talk about because, I mean, yeah, landing gear are fixed. They work now. That's great.
Yeah, actually, it's just kind of a hilarious problem that was in Space Engineers that's now fixed. So now let's talk about the actual cool stuff that came. I mean, it's not like that's not cool. It's just there's not a lot to talk about. There is something, though, that did come into vanilla Space Engineers, and that's small ship turrets, both a Gatling gun and a rocket launcher turret. Now, we've had these in mods, but we haven't had it in vanilla. Now, I haven't played a lot of the game with those in, like, dogfights, but Wasted, you had a live stream today where you had a bunch of dogfights with those turrets. So what's your experience with them?
Yeah, the live stream this evening was literally that. We built some fighters, and then I invited some of the community members in to just try those out. We had a bit of dogfights around some asteroids with the small ship turrets, and firstly, from a purely practical perspective, I mean, yeah, they work like standard turrets. They have the similar tracking issues, perhaps have a lower rate of fire than the big ones, which seems to be relatively balanced. But the big bugbear I know for a lot of people is the fact that they have a massive collision box. They are really quite big. 3 by 3 by 3 at least, if not bigger, and the missile one obviously uses the large connectors, which has a whole load of practicality problems as well. Now, from a more sort of retrospective game perspective, I'm a little bit worried about them. You know, it does mean that now, while okay, it works with the netcode because the netcode's kind of dodgy, all you need to really worry about is flying your ships, and you are otherwise dealt with as far as shooting is concerned. Your turrets are going to do the job for you. So I'm not 100% sold on the idea. I did kind of like the fact that small ships didn't have turrets as an option as far as vanilla was concerned. But at the same time, you can't complain that adding more options to how you build designs in vanilla can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that a lot of people do prefer building small ships that are multi-crewed because you can get a lot more detail with small blocks. I've seen a lot on the workshop. Now, granted, they do have a lot of mods on them, but I mean, this gives an option to vanilla-only players who prefer, guys who prefer to only play with what the game gives you. An option to have a multi-crewed ship that your friend could pilot. Because as it is now, you really can't have like a turret that operates on a rotor because it'll just explode off, and then there's the whole use of the ship problem where if somebody's already in a cockpit, you can't actually use it, use like a gyroscope to turn it. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but it does help out in another way, in another play style.
And honestly, I do think the reason that small ships are a preferred thing in Space Engineers, and I would say even in vanilla, you can build a much more detailed design in small ship blocks than you can in large ship blocks, purely because of performance problems. When you try doing the same equivalent thing but in large ship blocks, you are going to end up with a performance problem somewhere down the line. It just becomes undoable, untenable. And so the end result is small ships are the thing at the moment. So it does make sense to put these turrets in. They are quite cool to play with, and I've certainly made some quite fun things, including the turrets so far. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's going to open up a whole realm of stuff to modders in the future as far as what we get for small ship stuff, because now it's not a case of trying to figure it out for yourself. Now the example is there. If you want to work out how to do it, there is a literal piece of code that says this is how a small ship turret works. Now all you need to do is go and work out how you want it to perform and what you want the model to look like, which for some people is what they need. For some people are capable of working out the rest. Some people just aren't. Some people are just very good with textures and models and concepts without that programming knowledge behind it.
Well, it looks like turrets are a pretty cool addition, but let's move on now to the stuff that they added in 1.102, which is, to be honest, not a whole lot. Most of it's been fixes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a bunch of it that was kind of things that needed to be fixed, having fixed the stuff they did in 1.101. It was just kind of fixing the landing gear was a big deal, and I suspect that the reason it's taken this long is because it was something pretty intrinsic in that code. So it's introduced a bunch of other smaller problems, and that's completely natural with game development. When there's been a big bug kicking around for a while, when you do finally squash that bug, it's pretty damn normal for a bunch of other ones, smaller ones, to occur, because you've finally changed something fairly dramatic in how everything's operating. But, at the same time, there were a couple of other kind of interesting bits that came out that's worth mentioning again. Firstly, there's been a change to wheels that kind of works. We've gone back to having pretty good small ship wheel friction, which is great. But then large ship wheel friction is still a bit weird, so part of the way there in that respect.
And I think this goes back to what we were saying in a lot of earlier episodes about having to fix bugs. The game really needs it right now. It's not super stable with netcoding, and there are a lot of issues flying around. If they ever hope to add planets and attract more players, they're definitely going to have a more stable game to attract, regardless of whether or not it's in early access. Now, I realize it still is, but you want to retain players. Otherwise, once you get to the final version, there's not going to be anyone around to play it. So, completely understand from that standpoint.
And they've got some really big stuff coming up. You've got to remember that we've got this netcode fix coming in that has been on the cards for a while, and then obviously the big one, we've got planets. And so much bedrock needs to be laid down if that's going to be successful. Everyone looks at the game now and goes, well, as we saw this evening, even with all these performance fixes, all the stuff they've been doing, the game is still not there yet. Trying to get a 16-player server, even with guys in small ships with strict limits on what we were doing, isn't really possible, especially when you start including mods. People can't connect, and when they do connect, there's big lag issues and all sorts of weirdness. So this stuff is vital to the game's survival, and people need to, there needs to be some respect given to Keen that they're not doing anything but the stuff that's pretty vital at the moment. And it might not be noticeable in an episode like this, where we might not have a huge amount interesting to talk about, but that's because some of this really bedrock stuff is going on behind the scenes, which is the important stuff.
To talk about an analog, I think, is kind of like the difference between playing at 30 frames a second versus 60 frames a second. Now, gameplay-wise, it may not seem like there's much of a difference, but you feel like there's something smooth. There's something different about it that just feels nicer. And then if you even step to like 144 frames a second, oh man, is it buttery. So I think that's really what it's about. And I appreciate it. I really do. But I think we should now move on to something else that kind of exciting that happened. And it's not related to what Keen did, but instead rather what the community had made. Now recently, you may have noticed on the workshop, if you check that out for mods, that there was a mod called the Immersion Cockpit. It is Darth Biomech's fighter cockpit with an operable canopy, which I might say right now is amazing.
Yeah, I was massively surprised by this. I've recently started, most people that follow my channel will know I'm not a big mod user. But, obviously playing a lot with Morph, playing a lot with Shaq, you end up using mods quite a bit, experience them quite a bit, and you see this stuff and you think, damn, that's cool. I'm afraid I actually want that now. And so this is one of the ones I had to go out and grab. It adds a huge amount to the game for something so simple. Just going up to your fighter and having to open its cockpit, get in its seat, and then watch the cockpit close around you. And that's the important thing, is watch the cockpit close around you again.
You guys have to realize...
Adds so much.
You have to realize that Wasted has not been using... If you don't watch him already, and I'm sure many of you do, he doesn't use mods. But this is the one that pushed him over into the dark side.
It was. That and the modular thrusters pushed me into the dark side, and unfortunately I'm now sold on using at least a few mods. And I can't help but also mention that I was using it on the stream this evening, and I couldn't help but as the cockpit closes, I was making a little psh noise of it, like compressing every single time. I couldn't help myself. And as stupid as that sounds, it's these elements that are going to add the immersion to the game. It's appropriate that it's called the Immersion Cockpit, because that's it. That is 100% it. And I think it's this sort of stuff now that once we've got planets, once we've got netcode, it's this stuff that Space Engineers is going to kind of live or die by, is how well they can implement that stuff. I know we've certainly got an episode, I think, in the near future where we're going to talk a bit about some of the UI stuff that we might want to see in the game and some of the ways in which they could learn from other games and take their influence into Space Engineers. So I think maybe this is tying into that a bit, but yeah, I think it's very, very cool, that sort of stuff.
Speaking of that, actually, while we were having this conversation before we started this episode, you told me about a helmet HUD overlay, which I had actually seen already. There's a mod in the workshop, and forgive me, I don't know who made it. And if possible, we'll link it in the description. But it changed the overlay or the HUD for the user to make it seem like it was being displayed on the interior of your helmet, and that's really cool. I think that's a really good example of what we hope that the future Space Engineers would look like.
Yeah, indeed. But, I mean, let's not get too much into that. Let's save that for when we actually talk about UI. And
indeed.
Instead, there's another thing that came about with the patch, and this one's quite a bit more complex, but is best demonstrated by hopefully some footage that both me and Morph can show at the same time as this video, because the potential it potentially offers is... great line. The potential it offers is pretty huge. And this is, as I said, complex, and basically it revolves around a change to the API, the way in which modders can interact with the game, or in particular in this case, the way in which programming blocks can interact with the game. And I'm going to try and simplify this as best as possible, but it is now, you are now able to refer to ships in 3 dimensions in relation to another ship. And what this means, as you can probably see from the background, is that you are capable of creating a program that enables ships to run in a formation using vector 3D, which means that you can specify things like a cube or a sphere or various vector-based shapes, and the AI will follow it and is capable of referencing not only itself but where all the other ships are around it. And obviously this is early days, this is something they've just added, but you've got to admit, this footage brings back ideas of like real life drone swarms and stuff that people are working on at the moment. It's very damn exciting. It's basic, I'm sure, at the roots of things, but this is the very first iteration.
Yeah, like think for instance, let's just throw out a few examples here because it's worth noting to really spur on your imagination. If you've ever played stuff like EVE Online, which I don't know, many of you may not have, there's a lot of drones in that game, and one of the drones is like a repair drone or an E-War drone. Now the repair drone goes to a friendly ship, and actually they go around the ship and fix it. Now what this sort of coding is suggesting is that in the future we're going to be able to have logistic ships where we can deploy drones and they can repair things for us or go mine for us or provide like a shield or a net to protect us from incoming fire or incoming fighters. And that's really darn cool, and I'm sure some of you guys could probably think of some pretty amazing stuff.
Well, just looking at some of the footage from this video in particular, I was thinking of some of the comparisons that can be drawn for something like Sins of a Solar Empire, with how some of the sort of fleet and formation
yes,
gameplay works in that, for example. Essentially it's the same sort of idea. Admittedly, you have to zoom in quite a long way in that game to actually see it like that, and it just looks awesome, and it really gives me a bit of hope for if you to tie this back into some of the things we talked about in the last Patchology, like faction AI, for example.
Oh my!
Here we have an example of how a faction fleet could potentially not yet work, but this is the beginnings of how that faction fleet AI could possibly operate. And it gets me, keen have introduced this for a reason, and it gets me very excited to think about what it is that they've needed to do themselves that means that this particular change to the API has come about. What is it that Keen are doing that means that we've now got this toy?
Oh yeah, that really spurs on the imagination, doesn't it? I'm thinking drone fields that are really sinister in the way that they deploy and capture enemies. That means you. That's
it
really
can't
cool.
be a coincidence that we're seeing this not long after factions and pirates and stuff like that are becoming a thing.
Absolutely not. And it also makes me think of being able to be like a commander in a fleet and send out a signal for all the fleet ships to automatically go into a tight formation. You could like immediately command people to let their ships automate or automatically go into that formation. It could create really cool fleet battles, which of course we can't have right now because of the netcode. But in the future, hopefully we can. And we can do that.
It's getting there. The stream this evening certainly showed. While we cannot have massive fleet battles because of the netcode, it's getting there. This evening we had 16 people in fighters on a server, and while it was difficult to join that server and the server was kind of laggy, it looked amazing watching people fly around an asteroid field, fire going off in all directions. And don't get me wrong, this was modded with a very limited restriction. So people were allowed to use up to 2,500 blocks of their choosing. That was the only restriction. So there was some crazy designs, loads of guns involved. And Space Engineers was kind of keeping up. Kind of.
Yeah, I can second
that. A month ago,
that.
it would have fallen over within seconds.
I could second that. I was watching the stream too and trying to get in the server. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I wish I could have, but I came in late. And yeah, it looked actually pretty impressive. Now, there were some issues with it slowing down in sim speed at certain points, but for the most part, it was working a hell of a lot better than it used to, for sure. I mean, think just two months ago or a month ago, there's no way you could have done that.
Everyone had turrets. And one guy must have had 200 Gatling guns on the front.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So, in reality, Space Engineers is getting there, and these fixes are just showing that I actually think Keen is starting to really nail in on the bits that are going to make Space Engineers good, rather than kind of worry too much about fulfilling this idea of every week someone needs to get something new and exciting, because if we don't do that, people won't pay any attention, which I fear may have been the trap they fell into for a little while, which was that weekly update schedule, meaning that every week had to be something new and exciting, and there's no time to fix the game, because all we're doing is making something new and exciting for the next week.
And more bugs. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about, but there were some pretty cool things that the community had provided for us to have some ammunition, and I think it was more than worth talking about, because the Immersion Cockpit and the AI drones are really phenomenal stuff, really. But anyway, we're eager to see what your thoughts are. Last week, we talked about 6 things that we would like to see, features that we would like to see in a future iteration of Space Engineers. They're sort of dreams because they were kind of out there, but mods are a little bit more realistic. So the question is, for you guys, are there any mods or a single mod that you would absolutely love to see in vanilla Space Engineers? I certainly would love to see the Immersion Cockpit. I mean, Wasted, what's your opinion? So yeah, I think the potential mods have to offer to bringing them back into the game could be awesome. They haven't done it in a long while, but this week's kind of suggesting that there's so much more some of the mods could offer back into the game, and yeah, maybe it's something that Keen are going to start doing again soon. Hopefully it is. With planets out of the way, I can be sure that they're going to have a bit more time on their hands to start looking at other stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to hear what you guys think, and as someone who does not use mods a huge amount myself, yeah, I'm just kind of getting into mods as a thing. Weird as that might sound to most of you. It would be really cool to hear what you guys think about what are those must-have mods, because for me, that would also be what are those mods that I've got to go and try out. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Yep, cheers, guys. Catch you guys next time.